Goedenavond iedereen. Bonsoir à toutes et à tous. Bienvenue. A+ et Bozar ont le plaisir d'accueillir ce soir Michael Meredith. Vanavond presenteert hij een paar projecten van zijn bureau MOS, dat hij begin jaar 2000 samen met Hilary Sample in New York oprichtte. Deze lezing wordt georganiseerd in samenwerking met Archipel en Monera, de Brusselse galerie, waarvoor MOS in 2021 de collectie American Furniture Antwerp. La fonctionnalité et la simplicité prennent une place importante dans les projets du bureau new-yorkais qui construit en Amérique du Nord, en Europe et en Asie. Michael enseigne à Princeton et Hilary à Columbia. Ils considèrent l'université comme un lieu d'expérimentation où les idées peuvent être testées. Au sein de leur bureau, ils proposent des projets d'architecture et de design aux formes simples qui s'inscrivent dans la recherche d'un non-expressionisme. MOS krijgt regelmatig lovende kritieken en heeft aantal van architectuurprijzen in de wacht gesleept. El Croquis en 2G publiceerden onlangs een monografie van hun werk. Naar aanleiding van de lezing van vanavond sprak A+ met MOS. Het interview lees je in het laatste nummer van het tijdschrift dat hier vanavond te koop is. Voor ik het woord aan Michael geef, willen we graag volgende instanties bedanken voor hun steun. Onze structurele partner Febelsem, onze structurele sponsor D'Ieteren Immo, de Vlaamse overheid, la ville de Bruxelles, la région de Bruxelles-Capitale, ainsi que la Fédération Wallonie-Bruxelles. Merci à eux pour le soutien qu'ils apportent à notre cycle de conférences internationales. Je tiens aussi, bien évidemment, à remercier Bozar pour avoir coproduit cet événement avec A+, et je vous souhaite une très bonne conférence.
I want to say thank you to A+ and Bozar for the invitation here. Even though we're from New York, I'm from New York. I love the Belgian scene. I feel really, in a way, connected to it, even though I probably don't know most of you. And connected through shared tendencies, sensibilities, an architecture, composed of raw elements, material, unfinished, pattern. I made notes before coming into here thinking about what it is that I think we share. Thinking of architecture through its visuality, but also its physicality and utility, something in the world every day, vernacular. While looking at history, it's in this situation that where working like this and through these kinds of things, that architecture, innovation, and novelty is not shockingly new, but arrives at novelty from playing with the relationships between things, turning up or down the volume, changing the scale, the proportions, introducing movement or rotation, local symmetries and compositional games of material. And in this manner tonight, I thought I'd present a collection of very different things in the office, presented kind of with a staccato brevity. I'm going to just kind of flip through them relatively quickly once we get going. Maybe it's like our writing, and I'm going to give a kind of brief things to keep in mind. Keep in mind, since I feel like I have to introduce ourselves in a way to everybody. We're a partnership. It's Hilary and myself, Hilary Sample, and with about 4 or 5 other collaborators. We are a very small office. We are very close to all the work that we do. We are literally close to it. We live above our office. And even though I'm presenting only half of the story, Hilary sends her wishes. I thought I would share also some personal and intellectual context, which I really never do this. But I was thinking this might help, or at least be something different. We'll see how it goes. So just to give a sense of where I'm sort of coming from, I graduated with an architecture degree in 2000. Most of you, I don't know how old you, some of you look quite young, you probably don't remember this time. At that moment, at least where I was at, the parametric, if that is even a thing you know anymore, I don't know, and design software and photorealistic renderings had a sort of a promise, at least in the U.S. East Coast schools I was at. Technology was everywhere. It was supposed to be empowering. It was going to make things easier and better, faster. All the young faculty were really excited about it. But at the same time, I studied architecture with Rafael Moneo, Herzog and de Meuron, Toshiko Mori, all of which really focused on well-crafted and resolved buildings. And I studied art history. I did 3 semesters of independent work with art historian Yves Lambois, who at that moment had recently completed Formalists with Rosalind Krauss and was working in the archives of Newman, Barton Newman, Ellsworth Kelly, Ed Ruscha. And then the other thing I was doing at that time, and I think all of it kind of somehow is still there in the work, was I was studying electronic music composition. I had always a backup. It's a very bad backup plan, by the way, to be an electronic musician. But like, and I was there doing modular synths. They had a really good modular synth, an old Surge. And I was immersed in the histories of Bell Labs with people like Laurie Spiegel and Lillian Schwartz. The scene was an exciting scene. It seemed like a really kind of interesting moment, at least when I was a student. I was making friends at MIT with the Media Lab people who were doing this open source software processing. And it was sort of setting, it's what graduate school should be. It was sort of setting this kind of stage of interest. After that, after I graduated, I didn't really want to work for anybody. I moved to Marfa. I got an artist residency at the Chinati Foundation, and I was there for 4 months, and I was doing all the things that you couldn't do in school. I probably should have shown pictures of this, but I wrote this after this. I was doing cushions for Donald Judd chairs. I was designing little buildings. I was writing theme songs for people on spec. They would tell me what their theme song sounded like, and I would try to write it for them, and then we'd make little CDs for them. I was writing about these. Donald Judd had these in his architecture office, 2 glass bottles that were kind of unfinished and never went anywhere. And they're not an official recognized project by the Judd Foundation, which I thought was weird, but I was writing about these things. And also when I was there, I had the luck of being there when they have a Lannan Foundation is nearby, and with David Foster Wallace, a writer. And we became friendly and went hiking and we sort of kept in touch over the years. During this time, Hillary was working at A in Rotterdam. She was project architect for Prada San Francisco, which it was never built, but it's it's one of my favorite projects from that period of time. Sort of it's got these polka dot holes cut out over the whole, this thick aluminum facade. After that, this is all pre-office stuff. I did another fellowship with an art critic named Dave Hickey, a writing retreat thing for a month. And then I started to write art criticism at Art Forum. Hillary left OMA, went back to graduate school. We formed our office in 2003 in Toronto. We were both teaching at the University of Toronto. We started off, we were called, I can't even say it, that's how bad the name was. It was a deleted expletive. It was like the exclamation point, the thing, the question mark. It's like the thing you see in comic books when the superheroes get punched. And it was obviously a bad idea because we couldn't say it or get a website or anything. So it eventually became M space S for Meredith and Sample, and then that eventually turned into M, and then a circle, and then an S, and then it became Moss. When we started our office, we were both teaching and experimenting with technology, writing software, doing video game physics stuff, looking for some way to compose things, piling up rocks and things, playing around with sand. A lot of it was a kind of digital version of Fry Otto's experiments from the 70s at the Institute of Lightweight Structures, a kind of action art, sort of non-compositional models. And then one of our first projects we got was working with Pierre Huyghe, actually the artist, which we did a kind of puppet theater for him. And then afterwards, we started doing videos. I did a video with a neck brace getting yelled at by a critic, and we started filming all of our models and doing videos, things like this. We were designing a lot of small things, and a lot of the work utilized repetition and difference or sameness. And at the same time, we used like very advanced, I would say, writing our own software and advanced fabrication. We still do pretty advanced, I think, fabrication stuff in the office. And at the same time, we do pretty unsophisticated stuff. In fact, I'd say more and more we're becoming more straightforward and less sophisticated over the years, perhaps. Basically, the point of all this stuff is like it doesn't. Some of this is it really is. I'm trying to make it clear that this is really trying to build up a body of work. It's the two of us, and then with other collaborators in the office. But it's like that. It's not really. We're really not a business. The point for us always to get into architecture was not to have a business, but it was to how to live a creative life together, how to explore the world. And it's not easy to do that in architecture because the pressures are for sure are real to try to have a business. And it's for us to always be looking and thinking and reflecting on the world around us. And somehow, hopefully, at some point, all of this will make sense. Okay, this is a school in Denmark, Krabbesholm. It's an architecture school. It's part of an existing. It's in Skive, Denmark. Let me see if I can get this thing to work. This is kind of the main campus, the main building. Everybody eats here. There's dorms here. There's like a kind of dorms here. There's kind of studios. This is sort of almost like a Walter Gropius building. This is a house by Jorge Pardo. And we were given this kind of general site with these buildings. We were trying to make kind of relatively thin buildings that then also play off of and start to give some definition to the spaces also around it. Pretty open, simple. It's just a series of sheds, essentially connected by porches. The siding is a cement panel. It's a pretty standard, it's a Sembrit cement panel. The detailing of it was done in such a way that we slightly expanded the joint between it, put a piece of a polished stainless steel channel between them, so it kind of shimmers as you move around. You can see through the buildings. I mean, you can, when you're in the studio of one, you can see the other. That's kind of the point, so that when you're in the architecture, you're looking at the photography and you're looking at the graphic design, etc. Next project is, it's actually a guest house for a land art project by an artist, Charles Ross. It's made out of SIPs. It's really off the grid. I mean, it's in the middle of nowhere. It's on this ranch in a place called Las Vegas, New Mexico. The SIPs are obliquely cut to go together. The overarching geometry is a little bit like this, it's sort of like a scaled up fragment of a late Frank Lloyd Wright house, almost. Or even like, I don't know if you know the Shapiro house, one of these early Kahn projects. But the geometry is such as like this. We had two schemes. This is the one that got built. The other one was like a super long, it was like this just as one long building. I kind of like that one better, but the client did not. This system of construction is basically these SIPs that go together, and then there's a thin gap with the vapor barrier, which allows for I'm trying to get used to this controller thing here, which allows for the shingles to work as a heat sink. So they're continuous. There's a continuous aluminum surface, and that allows for when one side gets hot and this side is in shade, for the heat to dissipate over the surface, sort of like a Mac computer, I guess, at the time we were thinking. These chimneys, the field of chimneys on the top, work as solar chimneys. So that there is in the cabinetry in the walls there is a hole. There are holes which allow for the cool air to move up and through the building. It is really off the grid. I mean, it's like that. That's electricity. Septic is over here. It's some pretty weird details, just out of leftover. I mean, it's like when you're and this, like it's really impossible to get stuff to the site. Once you're at the site, like you have to just like take you have to take a shingle and cut it up to make a scupper. All of these projects, I mean, are really inexpensive projects. I don't know if anybody will believe me, but they are done incredibly cheap. And when I look at them, I can't say I really love everything about them. It's a very complicated relationship with some of the work. You think of all the missed opportunities. At the same time, as we were doing this, and in fact we did this before it was built for the client, and they were very confused by this. Is we did a series of videos of the models. So we did large models, or like 1 to 50 in metric, I guess, 1/2 inch equals a foot for where we are, and so large models, and then we would photograph and film them, and then we'd write stories. This is a story. They're playing with. They're for us ways to think about architecture. Very direct way. This is it's a story about a husband and wife architect couple, Frank and Alice. And Frank is a kind of macho formalist, and there's all these references, like to other things like Cage and Banham, and she's like an urbanist and interested in the everyday and the city and stuff like this, and sort of playing off of like kind of cliches that are kind of perpetrated in schools, and trying to figure out some other way. This is the long version that they didn't like. And all of I would say, and some level, all of the writing or all of the stories or whatever these are set up for, they don't go anywhere. There's really no plot. They kind of end where they start. They don't really resolve themselves, for better or worse. It starts always in a kind of pans, and it's like turns into, night, and then it turns back into day. Other books within the office, other things we were doing are always books, and I mean, we're constantly doing books. We've got like too many little book projects going on. This is a book on scale figures we did a few years ago, where we just, it was part of an exhibition, or came out of an exhibition that Beatrice Colomina and Mark Wigley did at Are We Human Biennial in Istanbul. And we said we would just look at scale figures of, cut out, like we were interested in representation and drawings and thinking about all the stuff that are not the architecture, essentially, and looking at how architects represent people. We did this kind of large book of just looking at, the students would scan in all the drawings or find them, and then cut out all the people from them. We got Kirsten here. It's a house in upstate. You can read that later. It's basically, it's a series of sheds also. It's pretty open. There's only 2 doors in the house, I think. This door and this door. I mean, there's the entry door. But and then there's sliding doors all around it, so you can go in and out. But the largest space in the house is the void, the garden. And this is like the kitchen. This is like music room, bedrooms, 3 bedrooms, and then like other program happens around the edges. You can see in some ways, like and there's a series of rocks around here. But in a lot of the work, I would say there are compositional games that are really, in a way, I always think very simple and classic compositional games, like, rotating the flooring pattern, the hatch. These are saw cut joints in the concrete, basically. There's a kind of symmetry here, but then there's an extra piece which shows the symmetry off, and there's a curve here which like makes it kind of rotate. And there's a sense of like, is it one that's split? Just get to the photos. Is it like one bar that's been split or 2 coming together? I mean, I think has a kind of like Gordon Matta Clark kind of moment there. For the bathrooms, the privacy and this is the bathroom is over here. Is like there is no doors, but the cabinet will open and create a kind of enclosure, privacy. And more like movies, like in a way, this might be one of the last ones. I think at some point things run their course. Like we work on things like this. We did a lot of stuff with software, and it gets at some point, if it just feels tedious, you stop. And like this, it was a lot of not that we won't go back to it, but this is a lot of it's just like a kind of lazy Susan thing spinning around with the lights going on and off, and thinking about. Usually the texts are really explicitly just thinking about architecture. While doing it or after, actually before it was in construction, I don't remember the exact timeline. We were asked to do a children's book. We had done some large books for Venice, I'm not showing it, but for Venice, the Venice Biennial. And we were explicit that they were, I don't know if Richard Scarry is a popular author over here, but we were explicitly kind of channeling Richard Scarry's children's books and trying to think about that in architectural drawings. And the CCA and Giovanna Borassi saw it and thought, oh, we should really do a children's book. So we wrote a children's book. And it's through Corini in Italy, who's also Bruno Monari's publisher. It's a very nice publisher. It's a story of, again, it sort of plays like Frank and Alice a little bit with our lives, probably pretty explicitly, although it is not our lives. And this is, I guess that's me and that's Hillary, and we have two children. And we did a story about this family wanting to. It's a very simple premise. The idea is they're looking to buy a house, and they go through history to look at houses. That's right and alto and little kind of jokes sometimes, but you got some contempt references, but and then eventually they can't find anything, so they decide to build their own house, and they learn about building houses, and then what ends. It doesn't show the end. The ending is kind of like life itself, sort of tragic, I guess, where they just decide they can't live there anymore. Is too much, and they sell it. And so the whole thing starts over again. This is a gallery in New York, a small gallery in Hell's Kitchen. Metal grating, basically, and a really bad floor that it was very low budget. We had to just have paint polka dots on it. This is I guess it's really a gallery, but we call it a store. But this is for it's now defunct. It was a design gallery in New York on the High Line, called Chamber. Really great client. And it was this leftover. It's actually the bottom of Neil Denari building. And obviously it was the space that Neil did not care about. It's like where all the ducks are, and it's just like all the junk of a building so that he could do a really nice gesture above. And so we basically mapped out, it was all about the ceiling and trying to map out all the ducts so we could fit as many vaults in between all the existing systems, the water, the sprinklers, the ducts, the air handling, whatever it was that was in the ceiling, and then suck up as much space or capture as much space as we can. And at the same time, we were working. There's a kind of material explorations that were rare, that the client actually encouraged. That's the client, actually. And so we were doing things with folded metal. We had done some before. We were doing stuff with marble. Like we made this custom wall system where all these are with custom screws that pop out. This one obviously has a different budget than with marble shelves, and you could screw in also brackets and stuff like this. It still wasn't that bad though. And then we did, in a way, this was part of, we'd always done it. Actually, since the beginning, we've always done like a lot of fabrication in our own projects. So we fabricated these walls ourselves, which is maybe a little crazy. In other projects, we've done staircases and we've done many other things. This is so you can get tools in certain ways. And this was sort of things we were trying out, and we haven't really done it since. I think but we've done it a few times on different kinds of things. But the idea, we were taking all the CAD drawings of marble and having it milled onto the real marble. So our architectural drawings became kind of literal material. This is a kind of reoccurring project in the office that eventually one day it will happen. I think there's like 2 projects that have been working with this, but this was like looking at EPS foam, which is incredibly. After doing the SIPS house and off the grid, we met a lot of people who work with SIPs and work with EPS foam and OSB and these kinds of materials. And so we were looking at things like just working with, this is a kind of product called geofoam. It's used underneath highways. It's a relatively cheap, good, it's recyclable. They chop it up and reuse it. It's, I mean, it's not, this is at a tiny scale. It's probably, it's not, for what it is, it has incredible insulation value, and we can just put stucco over it. In this case, is that what we were proposing. To just do a really inexpensive, almost passive level house. I mean, this is, it's like 0.8 meter thick blocks. This is a studio for a photographer in upstate New York. Basically, it's also a kind of shed building type, very straightforward in a way. The biggest things are maybe the overhangs are kind of larger than typical, and there's these large, what we call knee walls. I don't know what you would call them here, but basically like built-up beams out of plywood and framing that go out to support the roof and the overhangs, and then those are taken away to allow light in view in different locations. This is an earlier model of it that did not get built. That's what happens in the office sometimes. Yeah, so like this is all open. This is Jim's work. this was supposed to be a kind of, it's all just now studio, but this was supposed to be more of a drawing area, and this was more of a, so this was going to have tables in it. And then up above is kind of like a library resting area. It's all plywood. Very simple. I didn't talk about that in House 10, but there's a lot of details get like kind of worked out in different ways over and over again. Even things like, because this is a local window supplier that's relatively inexpensive in Connecticut, which is pretty close, and they make everything there. And but there's like a roll screen up here, and how to hide a kind of very simple mechanical roll screen. All of and this is the wall. The walls are all, and this is true for almost every project we do in upstate. It's 2 layers of framing with a gap filled with insulation. So the walls are heavily insulated. They're about 1 foot thick, and they're pretty good from an energy point of view. The windows obviously is where you lose your energy. But these cases, like we were playing with the scale of these kind of things and looking at this. The contractor actually installed that sideways, but it looked better. Like this was supposed to, this is the type of stuff you have to learn. Like this was actually, it's not that hard. I don't know why they didn't do it. It's supposed to actually connect like this. And then they flipped it, but it looked better. Like details are very simple details that we do a lot are kind of like mitered corners. So like the plywood is very thin looking as it gets into the plaster. And we have developed tricks and ways of doing that over the years so they don't crack. This is from before COVID. That's how my memory works nowadays. We were invited by Jamel at Locke Architects. He was curating the biennial, and he invited us and Go and Ambra. I don't know if she's here, but to do 3 installations. It was a kind of fun, quick project. We did a school because we had done a lot of metal work, and we knew a fabricator, which is going to be shown after this. We did something at the Guggenheim Bilbao, a kind of tent structure. We had some way of doing it that would be relatively, we thought, painless. But I'm sure it wasn't perfect. But we worked with Bollinger, Belgian engineer. One of the things, it did change quite a bit over its design life, actually. Kept getting smaller. One of the things is it's in Versailles and it's in a historic area, and you can't really touch anything, so you have to build this kind of raft that everything screws into, and because you can't do footings. It's kind of an interesting problem. And everything is built up out of these sheets, so all the beams, which are my favorite part of the project actually, and the columns are all thin sheets, relatively thin and light sheets of aluminum that are all just pieces that can be put together by one person, just built up. It's well used, is what we're told. We also, as part of this, we asked architects, and it's going to be published any day now. it's overdue. But we did another kind of children's book for it, which is a series of design exercises written by other architects. This is the big, we generally make, the first books we make are like always really ridiculously big, kind of like Richard Scarry, I would say, and, but bigger. And then they eventually get shrunken down to become more viable. So you can see there's, actually this is an older, we changed the layout of this a little bit. But we asked just people to make exercises for children, and so that some of the exercises would be taught, and we gave them, they already have them at the Petitical, so that they could use them to teach the children. This is a proposal for a studio, and it's actually an extension of both the EPS block research we've been working on for years now, and the aluminum, or it could be any kind of metal, folded metal pieces, to develop a system that we can use for, in this case, a studio, for a proposal for somebody, an artist. This kind of has a battleship, aircraft carrier, I should say, actually, kind of thing. There's a stair that comes up, and you can, This is probably one of the last things of software we did, which was a kind of simplifying of previous work, which we had worked with. We'd worked primarily, or I would say exclusively, in a open source software called Processing that I talked about at the beginning, which was developed by Ben Fry and Casey Reese, and two programmers at MIT, Young, and it incorporates physics simulation into it. I think now it's not that novel. I'm sure Rhino does it. Everybody does it with like Karamba and stuff. But at that time, there was no other way to do it. And so we were looking at that work. The software for us was trying to think of architecture in a different way. It was kind of like, it is actually sometimes very provincial reasons for things you do. Like, I was teaching with somebody who was just so obsessed with geometry, and it's always about geometry, and I was trying to think about, like, maybe there's another way where we can use, it's like Aristotle versus Plato or something. Maybe we can use matter or material, or like piling stuff up. And also, it would relate to like the formalists, the Yves Lambois, like working with art historian, thinking about composition, non-composition. And that stuff, those software things helped us with, we were asked to do an installation at the, I forget what it's called, the Architects of Effects or something, at the Guggenheim Bilbao. It's a kind of group show. And we wanted to do a tent. It's called like a tent without a signal, because we used, this is the framework, aluminum, folded, pretty straightforward. But the fabric part of it is CNC knitted with machines by Stoll, German company that does like the Nike knitted shoes and stuff like this. And it's pretty hardcore. It's really cool what they do. And so we were developing knits of things where we were using different techniques of knitting and knotting, different types of threads, and one of the threads we were using, or two of the threads, it was were a company called ShieldX, who makes specifically metallic threads to block cell phone signals. Another German company. So the idea is you go in here and nobody, you can't use your phone. They have to close it for it to really work, though. But anyways, it can work if you're in the back. And every panel is unique. I mean, there's some of the things with the knitting. Even this machinery, which is super, I would say, high tech. It works just like a jacquard loom in the end. It's like works off of images. It's like, or punch cards almost. It's crazy. So we had to come up with learn the system of how they work so we could translate the software stuff back into a kind of punch card. I mean, it wasn't that hard. It was kind of built in. But to be able to get everything to work out with the knitting. This is a project in Apan, Mexico. It's called Laboratorio de Vivenda, and it's a housing lab. There were 32 architects that had done prototypes for workers' housing. It's housing that is, I think, $6,000 US dollars to build each house, and it's an entity that's part government and part private. It's called Infonovit. I don't know how they exactly work, but they're a kind of quasi-governmental entity. They hired us to do a master plan and to also curate, because they actually had more. It was a kind of horrible situation to be in. It was like 50 architects they had asked, and they couldn't ask, so we had to come in and kind of produce criteria of who to chop out. And then all the way that these are organized is that on all the original proposals that they had, each of them had an orientation towards north, and so we just kept them however they were. So that's why they're rotated. They're rotated to maintain the original north orientation of the proposals. This is the building we did, and then some site work there. This is an educational building. It's offices, cafe, exhibition space. We were also asked by this client to do a book, actually after seeing the other books. So we did a large book. I don't know, I think we have, this is from the book. And we had asked every architect to write about one vernacular building as part of the book. These were supposed to be cisterns, which they didn't need in the end. I wish they did them, but anyways. They're like small water towers. This is it right after, a little bit after that. These are some of the texts by the architects. This is a book that really came out last summer, I think. I don't remember when it came out again. But it basically happened over COVID. It started right before COVID. At least everything was lined up. We knew what we were going to work on, and then it only got crazier during COVID, and so it took a little bit longer to complete it. But it's basically mapping out the vacancies that are noted. This is how many days vacant some of these properties have been. We went around and put little paper signs up on some of them. It's just the whole point of the book was to show. I mean, New York City has a kind of crisis of housing and social services and community-oriented work, and to show that these could be that a lot of the problems that exist in New York can be solved already without having to develop new buildings. And we looked at the square footages, and that everything was through publicly available data, pretty well researched. The thing is, it's not the whole picture. It's just working with what we have. I'm sure it's actually far worse than what we could get, because the people who are documenting the vacancies are usually the worst offenders. They're the ones that are. It's like the banks that want to. It's a finance instrument, architecture in some ways in New York. So it's a financial instrument. Like they want to keep it vacant so they can write it off as a loss, even if it's artificially inflated the rent, so that it's better for them to keep it unoccupied at a higher rate than to lower it, to get somebody in there. And part of it is also zoning laws, but it's a little bit like how Soho was in the 50s and 60s in New York, when it was had to be rezoned to allow for housing. It was manufacturing. At the end of the book, we do proposals of looking at specific ones. They're pretty naive in some ways, but just to show simple, show some ideas that it could become something else. This is a housing project that was also built. I think it finished in the summertime around the same time. It's a really hardcore affordable housing in DC. I'm embarrassed a little bit to show it because I think it's pretty rough, and it's definitely not up to Belgian standards. It is like formerly homeless housing. And also the codes in the U.S. are so much different. Like we are required to have two means of egress, but to do it, there's a lot of good things we did typologically. I think it could be better, but we did 2 courtyards. Which is really unheard of in this kind of type in the U.S. And we didn't do a double-loaded corridor with 2 stairs. It's usually like a dumbbell type with a double-loaded corridor, and you just have your things off. It didn't really work because the site was awkwardly shaped leftover, which helped in a way. But this is like the max dead-end corridor you can get. So it's like these 2 U's. Let me go back. The logic of the plan is pretty straightforward. Actually, this on this floor is unique, but like there's 2 U's. This should be hatched in. And then the logic is like works where that there's a kind of concentric ring of services around them that build off around here, and then these, because of the courtyard, you can get cross ventilation. Things like this. model. Okay, this is like model, reality. It's a little bit different. So cheap. It was supposed to be one of the things anyways, I don't want to get into developers. There's a person who works specifically in affordable housing with the government, kind of a nonprofit developer. But they just have these requirements that are like everything got cheap. Like because we got them 2 extra units than they originally thought they could get. We were trying to negotiate to get better materials and anyways. Proposals, house, sort of an extension of some of the other houses we've done, but looking at things like a curved glue lamp, which isn't that expensive, and doing it with one single piece of glue lamping. It was a client request in a way to do it, but we're happy with it. Hopefully it gets built. Hey, this is, we had to put this in here with Monera. We love Monera. We were so happy to be involved with Monera. Everybody, they're the best. Everybody, it's just, in a way, at some point, you just want to be around other architects and designers you would admire. I mean, there's no other point in doing it. These are a series of pieces that we did with these baskets, pieces that also work as stools, the wood stove, which is like really cool. These metal furniture pieces, the bench. I think this was something like the largest, they can correct me, broomstick handle or something you could get. The broomstick maker could make, or could do, anyways. These pieces, which they turned out really nice, is just one piece. And a lot of our work, I would say, we try to look in the furniture. It's maybe even more direct. Is look for reducing the number of parts, or like trying to do it with one part, like trying to make it. I don't know if you know, do you know the painter Francois Morellet? He's gone now, but he was part of a kind of interesting conceptual group in Paris, and it was hilarious about his paintings. He would say stuff like, it would all be about reducing the number of decisions and parts and things like this that he would do. So he'd be like, I pick a square because a square is only one arbitrary decision, not 2 like a rectangle. And then they would go through, and he would explain every painting through the series of decisions that were made. And inevitably, the logic of like trying to reduce the parts is a kind of conceptual project like that to some degree. In our mind. I mean, not as good, and definitely after the fact. Looking at kind of elements of, it was called American furniture because we were looking at things like the Shakers, which is a kind of never-ending fountain of design for many, and like looking at like the chair rails or things like the chairs that they made or baskets that they made, and thinking about also the whole way of living. Going back to what I said at the very beginning is like how to live your life in a way. How do you live a creative life, or how do you live with design or as a designer or an architect? And they were insane about it. Like they were really interesting at the beginning. It was all oral history, and then at one point when it became really popular, everybody wanted to be a Shaker because life was good. They had to really make new laws because people didn't know it. So they came up with these crazy laws, like, you know, you couldn't wear a checkered handkerchief after 2 o'clock or something. You know, it was like just over the top. This is a house for a photographer in upstate. It's a very simple house. This is the last project. It's from last year, but it looks like it's going to happen. It's just basically a large truss. And then with a living space above, like a bed space above loft, and then like a kind of stove, kitchenette, bathroom below. And then this is like parking. He has a truck. That's it. Oh, am I not supposed to go there? Okay. Should I go back? Thank you.